The war was ending, but Otto Henchel had never felt smaller. The factory air was thick with the ghosts of a dying empire, the clang of tools, the smell of oil, the silence between orders that would never come again. Outside, the Allies were already marching through shattered streets, yet deep inside a captured hangar near Kassel, Otto stood before a machine that shouldn't have existed. A P-47 Thunderbolt engine, the American R-2800 Double Wasp, sat before him like some alien artifact. Its size dwarfed anything he had built, its polish unbroken by desperation. He'd dismantled hundreds of engines, German and Allied alike, but this one felt different. It wasn't just power, it was precision, discipline forged into metal. He leaned closer, tracing the smooth casing with trembling fingers. Every bolt, every weld spoke a language his own country had forgotten, the language of scale. A mind could craft a single masterpiece, but this was the work of a system that could birth 15,000 more just like it. For a moment, the war outside vanished. Otto wasn't looking at a machine anymore. He was staring into a mirror that reflected everything Germany had lost: time, vision, humility. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the pride and ruin, a single thought surfaced. If they could build this, then perhaps we were never meant to win. He straightened, the weight of realization pressing down like gravity itself. This isn't an engine. It's a civilization. Before the war, Otto Henchel had been an artist in steel, a precision engineer who believed that machines were reflections of their makers. He'd grown up in Dresden, sketching gears and pistons in the margins of school books, dreaming of building something that would outlast the chaos of men. When the Reich called, he answered not with a rifle, but with a wrench. In the early days, Germany's factories were temples. Every machine was a masterpiece, every design a proof of national genius. Otto worked on Daimler engines, hand-fitted, hand-polished, hand-assembled. They were perfect but slow, elegant but few. He took pride in their artistry, in the sound they made when they came alive, like a symphony of controlled fury. But as the war deepened, that music turned to noise. The Luftwaffe demanded more, faster, cheaper. Perfection gave way to production. The workshops that once echoed with the rhythm of craft were replaced by assembly lines driven by fear and deadlines. Otto watched as the old craftsmen were replaced by boys, their hands unsure, their eyes empty. He tried to keep believing in the cause, in the work, in the idea that genius alone could win wars. But by 1944, that belief was cracking. Factories bombed, supplies gone, engines failing mid-air. Otto saw his creations return as twisted wrecks, black smoke marking the end of dreams. Then came the rumors of American planes that didn't break, that flew twice as far and came twice as fast. He dismissed them at first, calling them propaganda, but as the tide of war reversed, he began to wonder, how could they keep building? Where did their strength come from? Now standing before the R-2800, he understood. It wasn't about genius or inspiration. It was about systems. Invisible hands working in harmony, not for glory, but for endurance. He realized that while Germany had worshipped perfection, America had mastered repetition. And that difference, that quiet industrial faith, had won the war before the first bomb ever fell. The hangar was cold and silent except for the scrape of Otto's tools. He worked slowly, reverently, removing each bolt from the American engine as if unwrapping a sacred relic. Around him, the other engineers muttered in disbelief at the size of it, the polish, the sheer arrogance of its construction. But Otto didn't speak. He was listening. The sound of the threads, the weight of each component, everything about the R-2800 felt deliberate, almost alive. Every part fit perfectly, not because one craftsman had shaped it by hand, but because thousands had built it exactly the same way. When the cylinder head came off, the room fell silent. Otto froze. He stared at the precision inside, the valves, the cooling fins, the symmetrical dance of engineering logic. It was not artistry. It was mathematics turned to muscle. He could almost hear the roar that this heart once produced, propelling the massive thunderbolt through the sky. He felt something he hadn't felt in years: awe. One of his assistants, a young apprentice with oil-stained hands, whispered, "They must have built hundreds of these." Otto corrected him quietly. "Thousands." The boy's eyes widened. "Thousands?" He nodded. "And every one identical." That word echoed in the cold hangar. Identical. Germany's engineers had built perfection once, then moved on to the next masterpiece. The Americans built perfection and then multiplied it 15,000 times. As the realization set in, Otto felt a strange mix of admiration and despair. He wasn't just disassembling an engine. He was taking apart the very reason his country had lost. Each component was a confession, proof that the Reich had fought an enemy not of men, but of methods. He lifted one of the pistons into the light. It gleamed, smooth, balanced and strong. A simple object, but flawless in its repetition. He turned it over in his hands, whispering to himself, "They didn't build this to win one war. They built it to build 100. For the first time, Otto understood the true power of industry. Not in brilliance, but in belief. The belief that progress was not the work of heroes, but of systems. That night, Otto couldn't sleep. The images of the engine haunted him. The perfect symmetry, the impossible precision, the quiet confidence of a nation that built power the way nature built trees. He sat by the small window of his quarters, staring out at the ruined skyline. Fires still smoldered on the horizon, painting the sky in dull orange. The empire he had helped build was collapsing, and he suddenly understood why. He had spent his life believing in brilliance, that genius could change the world. But brilliance had failed them. His colleagues, men of great minds and ambition, were now broken and bitter, their dreams buried under rubble. The Reich had demanded miracles from its engineers, while the Americans had demanded consistency. He thought of the young men who had died flying his machines, the Luftwaffe pilots who'd trusted engines that were fragile, over-designed, built for pride instead of endurance. They had gone to their deaths in beautiful aircraft that couldn't last a war of attrition, and Otto felt the guilt settle like dust in his lungs. He opened his notebook where sketches of engines filled the pages. The lines that once looked elegant now seemed foolish. Unnecessary curves, delicate parts, too much personality. Every flourish now felt like vanity. He tore a page out, crushed it in his hand, and whispered to himself, "We built art when we should have built order." A knock on the door broke the silence. It was the young apprentice from the hangar, holding a small metal part in his hand, one of the spark plugs from the American engine. "Sir," he said softly, "I kept this. For luck." Otto looked at it for a long moment, then smiled faintly, not with pride, but with a kind of sorrowful understanding. "Keep it," he said. "It's more than luck. It's a lesson." When the boy left, Otto stared at the spark of light reflecting off the plug. In that gleam, he saw the truth. Germany's defeat wasn't born in battle. It was born in the factory, in every corner where arrogance replaced humility. And no victory, no ideology, could rebuild what they had lost. Days later, Otto was summoned to an Allied inspection site, a warehouse filled with captured machinery from across Germany. He entered quietly, his worn boots echoing against the concrete floor. Towering shelves held engines, propellers, fuselages, the bones of a nation that had once believed itself unstoppable. At the far end, a British officer gestured for him to follow. "You'll want to see this," the man said, leading him toward a line of crated American equipment freshly unloaded from transport trucks. When the cover came off, Otto's breath caught. Row after row of R-2800 engines, identical, spotless, ready to run. 15,000 of them, waiting in silence, a forest of steel and promise. He walked among them slowly, his hand brushing across each smooth casing. It was as if he had stepped into a cathedral of industry. Each engine gleamed under the dim light, every one a testament to a nation that had turned production into art, not through genius, but through discipline. The British officer chuckled. "They call it the American miracle. Build one, build 1,000, build them all the same. Terrifying, isn't it?" Otto nodded, unable to speak. The sound of distant machinery filled the air, humming with a steady rhythm, efficient, relentless. It was the heartbeat of modern civilization. In that moment, something inside him shifted. He had spent years believing that power came from innovation, from single acts of brilliance. But here, surrounded by endless perfection, he saw the truth. Real strength came from harmony, from a collective rhythm that no single man could conduct. He turned to the officer and said quietly, "You didn't just outfight us, you outbuilt us." The officer smiled faintly. "Aye, and we'll have to live with what that means." As Otto looked back at the endless line of engines, he felt both awe and unease. These machines were beautiful, but they were also prophetic. They spoke of a future where the factory, not the battlefield, would decide the fate of nations. And somewhere deep within Otto, wondered whether humanity could survive its own perfection. Weeks later, Otto found himself on a transport convoy bound for the West, to the occupied American sector. The war was officially over, but its echo still lived in the faces of men. As the train moved through the ruins of his homeland, he watched the landscape unfold like a confession. Broken bridges, silent factories, hollowed towns that had once hummed with pride. The old world was gone. When he arrived in France, he was escorted to a massive airfield under American command. There, for the first time, he saw the full spectacle of what the R-2800 had created. A fleet of thunderbolts lined in perfect formation, engines gleaming, their wings stretching wide like the armor of some industrial god. An American engineer, young and cheerful, greeted him. "You're the German expert, right? Wait till you see this." He guided Otto through the hangars, where teams of mechanics moved in seamless coordination, swapping parts, tuning engines, testing systems. Every movement was precise, practiced, efficient. It was like watching an orchestra with no conductor, every man in rhythm with the next. They stopped before an open engine being reassembled. The young engineer smiled, wiping grease from his hands. "We call her the Double Wasp. You know how many of these we built?" Otto met his gaze. 15,000. The American grinned. "Try 35. Otto froze. The number hit him like a blow. 35,000. The scale was unimaginable. In his mind, he saw not just the engines, but the people, the factories, the logistics, the will. This wasn't just engineering. It was civilization, harnessed, disciplined, mechanized. He looked around, the roar of engines filling the air, and for the first time he felt something close to peace, not in victory or defeat, but in understanding. The war had proven one truth. The future belonged not to nations, but to systems capable of sustaining progress. As a thunderbolt roared to life, its propeller cutting through the sunlight, Otto whispered to himself, "This is what power sounds like when it's organized." He closed his eyes, letting the wind from the engine wash over him. It smelled of oil, of heat, of destiny. And in that moment, he finally understood. The age of the individual had ended. The age of the machine had begun. The days that followed felt quieter than the world deserved. Otto was stationed temporarily among the Americans, not as a prisoner, but as an observer, a relic from a crumbling empire studying the anatomy of its successor. He spent hours walking the airfield, sketching the engines, tracing the pipes, memorizing the numbers stamped into every plate. There was no longer any need to steal secrets. They were everywhere, written in steel and order. At night, he watched as the airmen lounged beside their aircraft, laughing, smoking, talking about home. Their ease unsettled him. Not arrogance, but the kind of confidence that comes from knowing one's country can build 1,000 of anything before breakfast. He realized then that war for them was not desperation, it was logistics made holy. One afternoon, as the Americans prepared to ship another batch of R-2800s, Otto stood beside a young sergeant overseeing the loading cranes. The man turned to him and said, "Funny thing, huh? These engines, they don't care what flag you fight under. They just work." Otto nodded. "Machines have no ideology," he murmured. "Only purpose." He thought of his comrades back in Germany, the artisans, the craftsmen, the dreamers who believed precision alone could win wars. They had misunderstood the lesson. The Americans had not just built machines, they had built the system to build them. That was the real victory. When the convoy finally departed, Otto watched the crates disappear down the horizon. Each one carried more than metal. It carried proof that a new kind of power had taken root in the world, one that could think in thousands, not tens. As night fell, the airfield lights flickered on, rows of silver wings glinting like constellations. Otto whispered to himself, half in awe, half in mourning, "The age of genius ends, where the age of capacity begins." He turned away, his silhouette swallowed by the hum of distant engines. The war had ended, yes, but history, he realized, had only just begun.